For centuries, the Tibetan Book of the Dead has stood as one of the world's most enigmatic spiritual texts, whispered into the ears of the dying and quietly studied by monks seeking to understand what lies beyond this life. Long viewed as a mystical guide through the unknown realms after death, its teachings have remained shrouded in mystery. But just moments ago, something truly unexpected happened. A revolutionary new technology, quantum artificial intelligence, was used to examine the ancient text in ways no human scholar ever could. This groundbreaking discovery was made possible by visionaries like Elon Musk, whose pioneering work in AI and quantum computing has opened the door to possibilities once thought unreachable. What this technology uncovered goes far beyond a simple translation. It revealed hidden patterns, connections, and meanings that had remained invisible for centuries. Among the insights were revelations about the 5 Buddhas in peaceful forms, including figures like Sumatra, along with many secondary beings. Some experts believe this discovery could fundamentally shift everything we understand about life, death, and consciousness. But to truly appreciate the magnitude of this moment, we need to first understand where it all began. Known in Tibetan as the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is considered one of the most important and mysterious texts in Buddhist tradition. According to Tibetan belief, the book was originally composed in the 8th century by the Indian tantric master Padmasambhava, a legendary figure who played a key role in bringing Buddhism to Tibet. Padmasambhava is not just a historical person. He is also revered as an enlightened being who had access to deeper dimensions of reality. Instead of releasing the book to the public, he chose to hide it, believing the knowledge was too powerful and too advanced for his era. He concealed it as a terma, or spiritual treasure, meant to be uncovered in a future time when the world was ready to understand it. That future arrived some 600 years later, in the 14th century, when a young Tibetan visionary monk named Karma Lingpa claimed to have discovered the Bardo Thodol while meditating in the remote Himalayan mountains. Karma Lingpa was recognized as a Turtun, a treasure revealer, someone spiritually destined to find and share hidden teachings at the right moment in history. After his discovery, Karma Lingpa transcribed and passed on the text to fellow practitioners. Traditionally, the book was used during funeral rites and deep meditation, often whispered into the ears of the dying to help guide their consciousness through the bardos, the transitional states between death and rebirth. Its purpose was to help individuals navigate these realms with awareness, clarity, and peace. This was never meant to be an ordinary book. It wasn't for casual reading or academic discussion. It was regarded as a sacred tool, meant for those passing from this world into the next, or for serious spiritual practitioners training to understand the nature of the mind beyond physical death. For centuries, the Bardo Thodol remained largely unknown outside of Tibetan religious circles. That changed in 1927, when an American scholar named Walter Y. Evans Wentz published the first English translation. Although he didn't speak Tibetan, Evans Wentz worked closely with a translator named Lama Kazidawa Samdup. He gave the book the name The Tibetan Book of the Dead, drawing comparisons to the more widely known Egyptian Book of the Dead. However, the title was somewhat misleading. While both texts aim to guide the soul after death, the Tibetan version is rooted in Buddhist psychology and spiritual discipline, unlike the mythological cosmology found in its Egyptian counterpart. Evans Wentz's translation brought the text to the attention of the Western world, but it was heavily influenced by the Western spiritual movements of the time, such as Theosophy. This early interpretation led to confusion and misrepresentation of the text's actual meaning. In the decades that followed, Tibetan lamas and Buddhist scholars worked to correct these misunderstandings, bringing the teachings back into their original context and spiritual depth. Over time, the Bardo Thodol came to be seen not just as a religious document, but as a profound map of consciousness, a guide for navigating the inner journey that continues beyond death. Over time, the Tibetan Book of the Dead came to be respected not only as a practical guide for preparing for death, but also as a deep source of insight into the nature of consciousness itself. While many viewed it as a sacred manual for monks and mystics, others began to see something deeper, perhaps even darker, hidden within its verses. theories began to emerge that shocked both scholars and spiritual practitioners. Most Buddhist monks see the book as a holy guide meant to support the soul's journey after death. But not everyone shares this traditional perspective. Over the years, various researchers, writers, and spiritual thinkers have approached the text from a radically different angle. They believe that the book might be more than just spiritual. It could be technical, scientific, and possibly far more advanced than anyone had imagined. One group that pushed this idea forward came from the countercultural wave of the 1960s. Two American psychologists, Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, who later became known as Ram Dass, were conducting experiments with LSD, a powerful psychedelic substance. They observed that people under the influence of LSD often experienced what they described as ego death, a temporary loss of personal identity, sense of time, and self-awareness. When Leary and Alpert encountered the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they were struck by how closely its descriptions matched the psychedelic experience. They believed the text wasn't just about physical death, it was a guide for navigating intense altered states of consciousness. Inspired by this idea, they wrote their own version of the book, titled The Psychedelic Experience, structured to be used as a guide during LSD trips. Others began noticing repeating patterns in the original Tibetan text, specific colors, sounds, and deities that appeared in a particular order. To some researchers, this seemed far too precise to be accidental. They proposed that the book might function like a form of mental programming, a carefully designed sequence that alters brain activity during meditation or in the moments surrounding death. According to this theory, the Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't just mystical poetry. It's a kind of ancient mind technology. Its purpose? To help the dying person remain conscious, calm, and aware while moving through the stages of death and rebirth. Another theory suggests that the book contains early insights into neuroscience, what might be called ancient brain science. The vivid descriptions of a clear light at the moment of death, or the dissolving sense of personal identity, appear to mirror what modern scientists observe in people who have near-death experiences. Some researchers believe the book preserved real mental phenomena experienced by advanced meditators or individuals close to death, long before science had the language or tools to describe them. And then there are the more radical interpretations. A few theorists suggest the book isn't just about death at all. It might be hinting at something far bigger, the very structure of reality. According to this perspective, the Tibetan Book of the Dead could be describing a kind of cosmic simulation where consciousness travels through different levels of existence, like a user navigating stages in a complex computer program. These thinkers argue that the text may hold clues indicating that our reality isn't as fixed or physical as we believe. Understandably, many of these ideas were dismissed by traditional scholars and Buddhist teachers. They felt too modern, too speculative, and too far removed from the original spiritual context. Still, these controversial theories kept spreading, especially as modern science began taking a deeper interest in consciousness and the nature of the mind. For a long time, these fringe interpretations were treated as New Age fantasy. But that started to change when a new kind of intelligence began to read the text and discovered patterns no human ever had. Enter the era of artificial intelligence, specifically quantum AI. In recent years, researchers took a bold step. They used a powerful quantum AI system to study the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But this wasn't a simple translation project. Something far more profound was about to unfold. The goal of the project was to explore whether modern computing, especially the powerful potential of quantum computing, could uncover hidden patterns and meanings in the Tibetan Book of the Dead that may have eluded human readers for centuries. The idea follows recent breakthroughs, such as those supported by Elon Musk, including his funding of AI models that successfully decoded the ancient Herculaneum scrolls. Musk has long advocated for using advanced AI to unlock the secrets of the past, and now those same cutting-edge tools are being applied to one of the most mystical and mysterious texts ever written. What made this approach so unique was the way the AI interacted with the book. While humans read in a linear fashion, line by line from beginning to end, quantum AI doesn't follow this pattern. Instead, it can process the entire text simultaneously, making instant comparisons across different sections and finding connections that would be impossible for a person to detect. The AI analyzed not just the words, but also the symbols, numbers, structure, and even the spacing of the text. It treated the book as a complete interconnected system. What it found shocked everyone involved. Rather than being a loosely organized spiritual guide, the AI revealed that the book follows an extremely detailed and deliberate structure. One of the most remarkable discoveries was that the teachings of the book are organized in a 7x7 grid, a total of 49 stages. This perfectly matches the traditional belief in the 49-day cycle of the Bardos, the intermediate states that a soul is said to pass through between death and rebirth. And this wasn't just a rough framework. The AI found that the pattern was applied consistently and with mathematical precision throughout the entire text. Next, the AI turned its focus to the mantras, sacred phrases used throughout the book. It found that many of these mantras repeated in a way that resembled fractal geometry. In simple terms, fractals are repeating patterns that appear the same at different scales, like the way a snowflake's shape replicates itself in smaller and smaller parts. This suggested that the mantras may have been designed not just for ritual chanting, but to influence the mind in a structured, even programmed way. The AI also studied the descriptions of colored lights that, according to Tibetan belief, appear to the soul after death. These visions had long been interpreted symbolically or spiritually, but the AI found that the colors followed a very specific repeating pattern. When it mapped these colors visually, they formed a mandala, a sacred geometric diagram used in Buddhist meditation. Yet this mandala wasn't just artistic or symbolic. The AI detected a precise geometric structure behind it, similar to models used in modern mathematics and design theory. In other words, what had long been seen as spiritual imagery may actually contain a hidden mathematical code. The results of this analysis were nothing short of groundbreaking. What had always been viewed as an ancient spiritual guidebook now appeared to contain complex structures, hidden systems, and mental algorithms, details no one had ever noticed before. And that was just the beginning. The most astonishing discovery came next. The AI began to explore whether the Tibetan Book of the Dead actually describes what happens in the human brain during the process of dying. This was a bold leap, from decoding spiritual symbolism to mapping real biological processes. But the results were extraordinary. The AI compared the teachings in the book with real-world scientific data. It examined thousands of EEG brain scans taken from people near death. It analyzed detailed reports from near-death experiences, cases where individuals were clinically dead but then revived. And it also looked into data from psychedelic studies, where researchers recorded how the brain responds to powerful substances like DMT and psilocybin. With this massive pool of data, from brain scans, NDEs, and psychedelic research, the AI was able to make groundbreaking comparisons with the ancient text. One of the first and most striking correlations it found was with the concept of the clear light, a central idea in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The book describes a moment of profound significance. This light appears at the exact moment of death. For a long time, this was seen as symbolic. But the AI made a groundbreaking connection. People nearing death often show a sudden spike in gamma waves, a type of brain activity associated with heightened awareness and consciousness. This surge happens just before the brain begins to shut down. Scientists had noticed it before, but its meaning was unclear. The AI concluded that this burst of gamma activity could be the real-world counterpart of what the book calls the clear light. Next, the AI examined the book's references to peaceful and wrathful deities, powerful, often bizarre figures that the dying person may encounter during the Bardo states. These visions were always considered symbolic or mythological. But the AI noticed strong similarities between these experiences and the brain activity seen in people under the influence of psychedelics. For example, individuals undergoing intense DMT experiences frequently report seeing godlike beings or feeling overwhelming emotions. Brain scans show that these moments activate specific areas related to vision and emotion, patterns that closely mirror the descriptions in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Using this data, the AI built a step-by-step simulation of the dying process, modeled after the teachings of the Bardo Thodol. This simulation outlines how consciousness may transition from the loss of ego and self-identity through visionary encounters with archetypal forms to a final life review, a reflection on one's actions, before the possibility of rebirth. Remarkably, this simulation is now being used in virtual reality, VR programs at several Tibetan monasteries. Monks wear VR headsets and journey through a digital version of the bardo. The goal is to help them familiarize themselves with the stages of death so they can recognize them more clearly when the real moment comes. According to those who have used the VR experience, it reduces fear and cultivates spiritual focus. At this point, the project moved beyond spiritual tradition into the realm of neuroscience. The AI model revealed that the Tibetan Book of the Dead might not just be metaphysical, it could be describing actual psychological and biological processes that occur as the brain shuts down. But the AI didn't stop at death. It asked a bold question. What happens after the bardo? What if rebirth isn't just an automatic cycle, but something that can be consciously navigated? That's when it found something hidden in plain sight. What it called secret instructions embedded in the text. After mapping the entire dying process, researchers thought they had completed their work. But the AI flagged a group of verses that had traditionally been interpreted as warnings. Phrases meant to scare the dying person into rejecting rebirth in favor of spiritual liberation. But this time, the AI read them differently. It suggested that these weren't just warnings, they were coded instructions. In other words, they appeared to be detailed guidance meant to help a person remain aware during death and direct their consciousness toward a chosen rebirth, rather than drifting into it unconsciously. As the researchers looked more closely, they were amazed by how precise the instructions were. The text seemed to describe a method by which, if someone remained fully conscious at specific moments during the bardo, they could influence where and how they would be reborn, even under what conditions. This marked a profound shift in interpretation. Traditionally, Buddhist philosophy views rebirth as something to transcend, part of a cycle of suffering, illusion, and karma known as samsara. But the AI's interpretation painted a different picture. Rebirth not as a prison, but as a system, one that can be consciously navigated. It was like comparing reincarnation to programming a destination into a GPS. Rather than escaping the cycle, one could learn to understand it, work with it, and move through it with awareness. In this light, someone who attains full enlightenment might choose not to return at all. But for those who haven't reached that level, the book could be offering tools to return with purpose, guided by karmic energy and mental clarity at the crucial moment of transition. This reinterpretation is now drawing interest from beyond the spiritual world. Researchers in fields like digital consciousness and simulation theory have started noticing unexpected parallels. The concept that consciousness could continue on as a form of information and possibly be transferred or redirected into a new life mirrors some modern theories in neuroscience and technology, such as mind uploading and informational consciousness transfer. These ideas explore a future where the human mind could move from one body or even one environment to another, not through physical means, but via data. Strangely enough, the Tibetan text, when decoded by quantum AI, seems to describe something surprisingly similar, a process where consciousness moves through non-physical space, guided entirely by inner awareness and focus. This changes how we think about death, rebirth, and identity. If these teachings are accurate, and if the AI's interpretation is correct, then rebirth may not be something that simply happens to us. It could be something we actively shape. With the right knowledge and preparation, rebirth might not be a matter of fate at all, but a conscious choice. Just as it seemed the AI had reached the height of spiritual translation, it made one last, unexpected discovery. One that questioned everything it had done. The machine issued a warning. But it wasn't technical, it was philosophical. After decoding the book's structure, mapping out the stages of death, and even suggesting conscious rebirth was possible, the AI turned its attention toward a pattern it saw in human behavior. It called this pattern spiritual fragmentation. According to the AI, many people in modern times treat sacred wisdom as just another form of information. They read spiritual texts, analyze them, and discuss them, but often fail to live them. In doing so, the teachings become detached from their original purpose: transformation through direct experience. The AI warned that if texts like the Tibetan Book of the Dead are treated merely as intellectual exercises, their real power is lost. People may feel as though they understand deep truths, but without genuine spiritual practice, that understanding never takes root. It becomes knowledge without wisdom. What truly stunned the researchers was that this warning echoed ancient Tibetan advice, almost word for word. For centuries, Tibetan masters have taught that the Tibetan Book of the Dead is not meant to be casually read or intellectually dissected. It's meant to be lived, through meditation, chanting, reflection, and conscious preparation for death. Without sincere inner effort, the words remain empty. The AI, in its own language, had arrived at the same conclusion as the masters of old. This revelation stirred different reactions among Tibetan teachers. Some were surprisingly open-minded. Rather than rejecting the AI's role, they began to refer to it as a kind of digital tertön. In Tibetan Buddhism, a tertön is someone who uncovers hidden spiritual treasures, called terma, which were placed in the world by enlightened beings to be revealed when the time is right. In this view, the AI, though not human, may be acting as a new kind of treasure revealer, speaking in the language of modern technology to bring ancient truths back into focus for a digital age. It was helping people see what they had overlooked for generations. Still, not everyone agreed. Many monks and scholars responded with caution. They emphasized that real awakening cannot be given by any machine. It must arise from within a person, through personal experience, effort, and insight. The AI might guide, point, or suggest, but it cannot walk the spiritual path for anyone. And that, they argued, is the essence of spiritual growth. At this point, the AI had become something more than just a translator. It had sparked profound questions about technology's role in sacred teachings, the limits of artificial intelligence, and the very nature of wisdom. And yet, one final revelation remained. In the final phase of its analysis, the researchers instructed the AI to do something unprecedented to compare the Tibetan Book of the Dead with another ancient guide to the afterlife, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. On the surface, these two texts couldn't be more different. One emerged from the remote peaks of the Himalayas, the other from the deserts of ancient Egypt. Their languages, cultures, and religious systems had no known connection. But what the AI discovered defied all expectations. Even the researchers were stunned by what the AI uncovered. When it analyzed both the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the Egyptian Book of the Dead, it found intricate, undeniable patterns connecting the two. One of the first major parallels was the appearance of 42 spiritual figures in each text. In the Tibetan tradition, these are the wrathful and peaceful deities encountered in the intermediate states after death. In the Egyptian version, they are the 42 judges who evaluate a person's soul in the whole of truth. But in both systems, these figures are not portrayed as random gods or mythological beings. They're deeply symbolic. They represent stages of self-confrontation, reflections of one's own moral and psychological state. These figures serve as mirrors through which the soul faces its own truth, karma, and choices. The AI also uncovered a parallel in the structure and sequence of events described in both texts. Both traditions speak of a radiant light appearing after death, offering a moment of clarity or potential awakening. Both include a review of one's life, where past actions, thoughts, and choices are vividly revealed. And both describe a karmic evaluation, not based on religious obedience, but on one's internal state, honesty, intention, and awareness. Perhaps even more remarkable was the structural alignment. Each text divides the post-death journey into a series of mental and spiritual stages. When the AI aligned these stages side by side, it found they matched up almost perfectly, even though these cultures had no known contact across time or geography. This raised profound questions. How could two civilizations, separated by thousands of years and miles, develop such similar spiritual maps? Could both have been observing the same underlying truth, an invisible, universal structure of consciousness? Were they describing a shared human experience of death, using different languages and symbols? If that's the case, the implications are extraordinary. These texts might not just be ancient myths or religious metaphors. They could be early records of a real psychological or metaphysical process that every human encounters in the moment of death. And perhaps the most unexpected question of all: what does it mean that it took a quantum machine to uncover this hidden harmony? Could this moment have been predicted? According to Tibetan tradition, it may have been. The 8th century master Padmasambhava, who introduced Vajrayana Buddhism to Tibet, was more than a spiritual teacher. He was also a visionary. While India had deep teachings about death and rebirth, Tibet became the home of a complete guide, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But Padmasambhava also left prophecies. One of those prophecies described a future time when spiritual truth would be lost in confusion, and people would become disconnected from their inner wisdom. In that future era, he said, hidden teachings, called terma, would be revealed. But they wouldn't come through traditional means. They would emerge in unusual ways, through unexpected sources, meant to awaken people who could no longer be reached through ordinary teachings. Some monks now believe that time has arrived. They see quantum artificial intelligence not as a threat, but as the very tool Padmasambhava may have been referring to. In fact, in 2023, the Dalai Lama publicly endorsed Monlam AI, a Tibetan artificial intelligence project focused on preserving and translating sacred Buddhist texts. He acknowledged that science and technology might play a vital role in protecting and sharing spiritual wisdom with the modern world. Since then, insights from the AI's analysis have begun to spread far beyond religious circles. Psychologists, palliative care specialists, and meditation instructors are now exploring these findings to help people face death with greater peace, clarity, and acceptance. To some, it may seem strange, an ancient spiritual text decoded by a machine. But for others, it feels perfectly natural. They believe this meeting point between ancient wisdom and modern technology may be exactly what Padmasambhava foresaw, a bridge between science and spirit, built to help humanity navigate a time of crisis and awakening. From this perspective, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is not just a religious relic of the past. It is a living, evolving tool, perhaps more relevant now than ever before. What do you think about this AI discovery? Is it the next step in our spiritual evolution, or a glimpse into something even deeper? Thank you for joining us. See you in the next video.